If you're an avid watch collector, then you're likely familiar with how the watch market shifted in about 2020, and we saw a large surge in both demand and watch prices, peaking somewhere around the year 2023 and into the beginning of 2024. Though now there is a change in the watch market that no one is talking about, and it's going to be changing the way that you buy and sell watches from your collection quite considerably. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how the watch market is and is becoming increasingly no longer retail versus wholesale, but instead a different model that's developing right now, as well as how this helps you as a watch collector, whether you're looking to buy or sell a watch. So for about 100 years, the watch market hasn't really changed. You would have your retailers who would have either a store presence or eventually an online presence, or maybe private party collectors, celebrities, things like that. You'd have the retailers, and then you'd have the wholesalers who would buy from the public. They'd have kiosks in the jewelry district or in the mall, or maybe even they would own a pawn shop and they would sell to the retailers either in bulk or piece by piece, depending on the type of wholesaler, how long they could hold the inventory, and so forth. So you'd have the retailers who would sell to the retail customers and collectors, like most of us watching this video, or you'd have the wholesalers who would sell to those retailers or businesses or marketplaces, or even your jeweler down the street, like a Jared or a Kay Jewelers. What we saw during the watch market surge starting in 2020 with the demand and the prices is a whole influx of people that wanted to become watch dealers. They wanted to trade watches, flip watches. There are courses out there that were pushed where people can learn how to buy and sell watches. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but it's something that happened is now there's all this demand during this time period, and all of these businesses and professionals popped up to try to meet that demand. And it worked very well while the watch market was booming, growing, and the demand was still very high. But then in 2024, the beginning of 2024, the watch market began to cool down considerably. Now, there have been some changes previously to that, especially to the most desirable sought-after models and the blue-chip brands, but really this is the point that I consider the changes to be pretty noticeable in terms of demand from the watch collectors for how many watches they want, as well as their willingness to pay the inflated price. So this takes us to a point where we have all these new dealers, both retailers and wholesales, but predominantly retailers because it requires less capital, because it's less of a volume and more about the margin. And you have a pullback in the demand, which is pullback in trading volume, but an increase in the amount of professionals that are looking to buy and sell watches, which makes it a much more competitive market for those looking to buy and sell watches. Now what we have is the major change or shift in the watch market that's happening, and this is the wholesalers who would really never want to sell a watch to retail because they don't have customer service. Maybe they don't offer warranties, things like that. They weren't built for that model. In an effort to kind of recapture some of the business that they've lost in the down market, they've begun to sell to retail customers either through their own platforms or various marketplaces, Chrono24, eBay, Bezel, you name it. And what's also happening is because there's so many more retailers, the retailers are trying to recapture some of those lost sales that we've seen in this highly competitive market by selling a watch to literally anyone, whether it's wholesale at a smaller margin to another dealer or just to the public at a price that would have been otherwise maybe a little bit more than wholesale. So we have this new competitive market where the wholesalers and the retailers are really just looking to sell their watches to any buyer today, as long as they can make some money in the deal, move the watch, and keep the business moving forward. Now, to further complicate things, companies or brands, manufacturers like Rolex have unveiled and launched their own pre-owned programs where they offer certified pre-owned watches either directly through them, in the case of companies like H. Moser, or like Rolex through their authorized dealers, because they only have an authorized dealer business model. They don't have their own boutiques that they run and control. They have authorized dealers that have the Rolex name on the brand. And so what we have is now we have a total change in the market from being retailers versus wholesalers, regardless of the authorized, to more of a shift of retailers that are certified by authorized dealers that can charge a higher price or want to charge a higher price because the brands are behind them, versus the unauthorized or the secondary market, which is now comprised of what would have been wholesalers or retailers. So now we have authorized versus unauthorized, whereas before it wasn't as focused on that differential. It was more retailers versus wholesalers. Now, what is this all meaning, and what does this matter for watch collectors like you watching this video? First, this is a buyer's market. This is a buyer's market like I have never seen. I've been in watches for 15 years at different capacities, different companies, professionally trading, flipping. Of course, I founded Del Rey Watch with my partner, Federico from Federico Talks Watches, which I have since sold my shares in, and they're still doing quite well. Luckily, Federico has a very great online presence, so they're doing just fine. But right now, it's a buyer's market. You can go on places like Chrono24, and you can find a watch price that's $500 above the wholesale kind of trading B2B, business-to-business transaction market out there. You can get these deals for just a little bit more today, currently, on places like Chrono24 and other marketplaces, which the wholesalers have begun to use as their retail platform. So this is awesome for people that want to buy a watch right now. You can go out and get a price like I've never seen. Even myself, I've begun picking up watches that I can't even imagine getting the price so low, even being in the industry within the last 5 years, like this Omega Speedmaster gray side, which I bought so low, I still have a hard time believing it. I've purchased some other watches like a Chopak and a couple of others that I would have had to pay double for just a handful of years ago. But on the flip side to this, right now is probably the worst time to sell a watch as a collector that I've ever seen. There are so many collectors that have amassed these large collections of watches through the big surge in demand that we saw that still held on to them, that have been trying to get rid of them. But unfortunately, the dealers have to pay a lot less today because it takes a lot longer to sell the watch. There's this new increase in competition across the board, which I've just explained. But addition to that, also the dealers are holding the watches longer. And because of this, the dealer can't really predict like they could before how quickly they'll be able to sell that watch, because we're getting into a new type of watch market that we either haven't seen in about 7 years or it's new altogether. But certainly the demand is down, and because of this, if you have a watch that you're looking to sell, unfortunately, it's not the best time. Now, we all can't amass these collections and carry them on forever. Swapping watches in and outside of collections is a very popular thing that happens with collectors all the time. You know, you got to kind of thin the herd, as they say, out there in the watch communities. But right now, unfortunately, is not a great time. Luckily, there are some places that you can go that try to help alleviate this kind of change in the market. Places like eBay and Chrono24. If you post a watch private party for sale, let's say you shop the watch around to a bunch of dealers and the number is just too low, you can't stomach it, maybe you're taking too much of a loss. Well, you could always go out to places like eBay, sell your watch private party, and eBay offers this authentication service. So, you know, working with a dealer isn't as important as it was in the past, just so long as you have that major thing, which is the trust and the authenticity, which third-party players are now starting to offer, sometimes at a cost. So there are, thankfully, some ways that companies have been trying to help the private party or end collector sell their watch without necessarily having to take a very big loss. So ultimately, these changes are unfolding before our eyes. I launched a B2B marketplace for wholesalers to exchange inventory called Chronograbs. You can feel free to check it out, chronograbs.com. And among the users, talking with them, working with them over the last so many months, this is what I found. These are the results that I found, is the changes in the market are happening. They're happening quickly. Great time to buy a watch, get phenomenal deal, very open to negotiation across the board, and you can get some prices on watches, myself included. I'm doing it, that just haven't been able to do it at the price point for the last 5 years. But unfortunately, it's not the greatest time to sell a watch if you're looking to limit your loss, depending when you bought it, and as well as kind of if you really need to let the watch go. So some options like I spoke about, like eBay or Chrono24, but the reality is today is a buyer's market, and if you've been on the sidelines or you've kind of just felt that the prices got a little too crazy, I think now is a great time or a great point to get in to some of the watches that maybe you'd like. But time will tell, and I'm here to keep you updated. Guys, I know I haven't shot a video in a while. I've been pretty busy with other things, but I look forward to releasing more videos in the near future. If there's anything you'd like to see, please leave that in the comments below. You can find me on Instagram, The Real John P., and we'll see you next time. You've been chatting with John P.